A reminder to everyone that we are watching the Huddle. I'm Ethan Diamandis. He's Jon Anik. John, let's hit on the UFC 315 main event right away. Last I checked, Belal Muhammad minus 250 favorite over Jack Della Maddalena. He's the plus 200 underdog.
Yeah.
In the long trip from Australia as well to fight for the belt. John, I always hoped that JDM would end up fighting for the belt, but I think for most people, the timing is a little bit curious. This is not a knock on Three Name Jack's talent by any means, but he has been out over a year with an injury, but he's here now fighting for the title. John, can you walk our listeners through how we got to Belal versus JDM at UFC 315 in Montreal?
You are right in terms of the timing and Jack Della Maddalena at this point in time being anointed the number one contender. Now, at one point in time, he was in line to face Shavkat Rakhmonov in Perth, Western Australia, which is where he is from. And that fight did not happen because of an injury or whatever circumstance, and whatever side it was on. Now Jack Della Maddalena finds himself in a championship setting, and sometimes that's just the way the marbles fall in MMA. Sometimes it has to do with a promotional push, or maybe how much a given champion or title challenger could make the UFC in the future, right? I mean, I don't have to tell your audience that Australia is as rabid an MMA nation at present as there is, even though I have said repeatedly loudest MMA fans maybe per capita are in Canada, so loud per individual, but the Aussies are the biggest mixed martial arts fans in the world. So if Jack Della Maddalena is champion, even though he's not the most verbose guy, my word. So he's a tremendous fighter, right? I mean, as far as the mixed martial arts skills go, he has them all. And, I would stop short of calling him a live underdog at plus 190 because I'm calling the fight, but I have been watching the film, and he has a lot of different ways to win. So I'm very excited about this fight. I'm excited for Jack and the opportunity, and for his team. They've worked very hard. I know it's hard to get to Montreal from Perth, Western Australia. This is not mainland Australia, so to speak, right? If I can call Sydney and Melbourne mainland Australia, it's a long trek. And you can be sure they have left no stone unturned because they know how good and brutal the champion is to deal with.
For sure. And, there's a rhetoric around the promotion right now that maybe the UFC is lacking a bit of star power and that kind of big draw that folks are looking for atop a fight card. John, you react to that. I mean,
well, dude,
you
know I love you, Ethan, right? But what about the fighting nerds, for example? Where were the fighting nerds 2 years ago? Now, I can't tell you in terms of the internal metrics how much money Caio Borralho or Mauricio Ruffi has made the UFC yet, right? But even as a guy who's charged with building these stars live on television, sometimes I don't even have to do anything. They just put on funky glasses and they knock people out the way they do, even if they don't speak English, and they're off and running. So sometimes, I think it's a little bit of a tired narrative, right? Like, yes, I do believe we have champions right now who maybe aren't knockout artists per se, like some who have been atop those divisions prior. But John Jones and George St. Pierre, as you and I have discussed prior, have double-digit decision wins, and they're two of the greatest of all time. So the cupboard's never bare. Maybe I'm a little bit sensitive here on a Thursday. I don't know.
No, I got you. And I think star power, especially in a sport like MMA where your stars are maybe fighting once, twice a year, it is especially difficult to quantify what makes somebody a star. I'm not arguing that the talent is lacking. I think if I'm using a benchmark for star power as what is bringing my friends who don't watch MMA out of their apartments to the bar to watch, or what is making them buy tickets, I do think, knockouts sell tickets. And, at the moment we are a little bit short on some of the champions delivering those big moments. Still, welterweight is a really, really competitive division. And, Shavkat Rakhmonov was an ambassador of the Finnish train. He was delivering a finish in one of his fights. But the last one against Ian Gary, who I know you are high on, I am very high on as well. He put on a good performance against Carlos Prates last weekend in Kansas City. After that fight, he was asked, or Dana White rather was asked, if Gary was indeed the backup for UFC 15. And Dana White responded in the affirmative. Yes, Gary is the backup. A guy clearly who has no problem taking fights on short notice. He's done a couple of those in a row. What do you say to that about Ian Machado Gary offering himself up?
Well, he better hope that one of these guys doesn't fall out, right? Because I think it's biting off a little bit more than he can chew in terms of the 25-minute nature of this fight. Now, there are other components to this type of situation that other athletes might have to deal with, right? Like a Jeff Neal, as you and I have discussed, who maybe balloons up to a lot more than 180 pounds on fight night. But for Ian Machado Gary, making the weight and banking a couple $100,000 to weigh in as the backup is more strategic than it is anything else, right? Not to suggest that Machado Gary couldn't weigh in as the backup and still take a non-championship fight next, but it does lay a little bit of foundation for you to be next to fight for the title. He's not going to be that, I think, because you can argue there are a couple guys ahead of him, but I think that's a big part of it, and he really is cut from that cloth. And as trite as it may sound, as you know, Ethan, and you back this train, right? He is an anyone, anywhere, anytime type of fighter and wants to build his legacy by fighting the best. And that's why he just fought a very dangerous Carlos Prates without a real 8-week training camp. So power to Ian Machado Gary for doing it, right? But like, if you're trying to wrap your head around how competitive he would be against Jack or Belal on 2 weeks notice, given the physicality of the fight with Prates and how things went in round 5, I don't know the extent to which I'm buying that, but I'm selling that live on pay-per-view if I have to.
100%. Man, every time we have one of these chats, John, I feel like we're talking about the welterweight division. And I think that's a good thing. Again, a division that doesn't necessarily have the crazy knockout stars at the top. Belal Muhammad, of course, very dominant in his own manner, an excellent grappler, very strong, good cardio. And I'm starting to think more about this welterweight division, and there is someone lurking atop the pound for pound list, Islam Makhachev, potentially, moving up to welterweight at some point. And I'm starting to think, John, is, in your mind, welterweight the best division in the UFC? Dustin Poirier is retiring. That's a big knock for lightweight. I mean, we always talk about 155 being this benchmark for the most exciting, the best fights in the UFC, but does welterweight enter that conversation? Is it on the podium? How do you feel about a theory like that?
Absolutely. I think it's always sort of been a part of the conversation, but I think you lay out a pretty strong argument right now that if it's not the deepest division in terms of the top 15, it certainly has the biggest logjam at the top, right? If you look at middleweight, Khamzat Chimaev would seemingly be the obvious number one contender. If you look at lightweight, it's Arman Tsarukyan, but he sort of missed an opportunity and, I think is being punished, for lack of a better verb, as such. At welterweight, we could throw 4 guys in there right now. Trust that Joaquin Buckley was considered to face Belal Muhammad at UFC 315 before Jack Della Maddalena's name was called. So there's a lot of meat on the bone at welterweight right now. It's a very exciting time in the division, and I think it's interesting for the incumbent. That man remembered the name Belal Muhammad at 35 years of age, right? Historically, with a style that hasn't necessarily been to repeatedly put guys away. It's hard to beat guys time and time again, sustaining over 25 minutes. I do think he can find a finish against Jack, but there's a lot of different dangerous components to Jack, even when Belal's in a dominant position on the ground. So fascinating fight for Belal's first title defense. And as I've said repeatedly, and I think this is a big part of the narrative, the best part of all of this, the depth of this welterweight division, is at least right now, you have a champion in Belal Muhammad that wants to face the next best guy 3 months after May 10th. And that's the truth. Now, the extent to which Jack Della Maddalena would fight 2 more times this year, I don't know. But I can tell you, as a confidant of Belal, that if you need the guy in 3 months, he's signing on the dotted line.